All right, guys, it's that time of the week, and it's the Sports Corner's Power Rankings, the top 10 teams that I believe are the best teams right now in the NFL. It's been a crazy NFL season so far, so many highs and lows, so many upsets. I don't have to tell you guys, you saw them. And a lot of good matchups that the week that just passed, week 4, Detroit versus the Seahawks, the Ravens pitting a shellacking on the Bills. So many good games. So many bets lost. My most profitable week, by the way, week 4, but that's besides the point. But let's get to my power rankings after week 4 in the NFL. All right, at number 10, we have the Washington Commanders. If you'd have told me they'd be a top 10 team right now in the NFL, boy, I wouldn't believe you. I mean, what can you say about Jaden Daniels that hasn't been said by a lot of people already? Surprising a lot of people. He's now probably the favorite to be Rookie of the Year, beating out Caleb Williams. The guy's thrown over 80% of his passes, so he's just slinging it and doing great. 897 yards passing. And not just him, they got Brian Robinson Jr., who's having a really good year, and that's probably because he finally has a quarterback who's competent. But yeah, this is the Jaden Daniels show. This guy is just lighting it up. Now, I could definitely see them start falling back to earth after teams gain more tape on Jaden Daniels. But also, he's a rookie and he might fall back to earth. My main concern for the Commanders is that they have a terrible secondary. It is not great. And the teams they've beaten are the Giants, the Bengals, and the Cardinals. All 3 of those teams, I believe, have 1 win each. I think maybe the Giants has 2 win each. I could be wrong about that. No, every team has 1 win each. So they've beaten teams that have a combined record of 3-9. So that's not looking good. And the team they did play that has a winning record that's 3-1 was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Buccaneers blew the doors off of them, 37-20. But this is a great thing to watch. They're really look like a good crew over there, and it's just so fun watching Jaden Daniels. But I do believe they will fall back to earth. But right now they are number 10, and they are looking. The future's looking real good for them. All right, and number 9, I have the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers had a good bounce back win, beating the Patriots. Patriots are not that great of a team, but they did blow them out and they covered the number, which is what you want to see. They got a lot of things going for them. I know they're 2-2, but they still got They still got a lot of weapons, and Debo, Ayuk, and Mason and Jennings. They're winning games and keeping it competitive without the help of Ayuk. He's just been terrible since he's got his contract. Maybe that picks up. If that picks up, the San Francisco 49ers will be more deadlier. And Jordan Mason's looking great. 447 yards rushing since he started week 1. So he's looking really great. A solid backup behind CMC. And Brock Purdy is looking like a top 5 MVP candidate. He is just slinging the ball, has over 1,100 yards passing. So he's looking way better. He's looking better than I thought. But the thing about the 49ers is the 2 teams they beat, the Jets and Patriots, are not good teams. The Jets, you saw what the Jets did. They lost to the Broncos. And the Broncos are a terrible team. So that says more about the quality of the Jets. And they beat the Patriots, Patriots are going to be fighting for the number 1 pick in the draft this coming year. In 2025. So the opponents they haven't beaten are not great, and they lost the Rams, and they lost a respectable loss to the Vikings. So got to see more out of them. Their secondary is not that great as it once was or feared, but they still have Fred Warner doing Fred Warner things, being the captain of that defense, and he got a pick 6 last week. So I got them at number 9, but we want to see a little more that they could beat and stay with the big teams. So I think you want to see out of the 49ers, and that's why I have them at 9. Number 8, I have the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks, they got a really great, tremendous offense. They have all the weapons in the world. Geno Smith is looking like better than ever. You want to see some more touchdowns thrown by him, but he has over 1,182 yards passing, leads the league. but he only has 4 touchdowns, so that's not so great. Kenneth Walker looks awesome. Guy has 4 touchdowns, and that's pretty good for a guy who's been hurt the last 2 games. And they have DK Metcalf, who's doing really great too. He has 366 yards. But they also have Lockett, Smith, Fant. They do lose the Detroit Lions in a kind of a blowout, but it was a great fun game, by the way. But they were a little beat up all across the defensive line. I believe they didn't have no defensive line, the starters playing that game. But their secondary that everybody was bragging about got lit up by Goff. Goff didn't have 1 incompletion. It wasn't like he was throwing short passes either. Guys were just wide open on them. And most of all, I have at number 8, I'm sorry, is that the 3 teams they did defeat are 3 terrible teams. The Broncos, Patriots, and Dolphins are all terrible. I don't care that the Broncos have 2 wins. They're an overrated, terrible team, and they'll have a top 10 pick in this coming year's draft. So, no. And when they do play a good team, like the Lions, they lose by almost 2 touchdowns. So, got to see a little bit more from the Seattle. They do play against the Giants, so hopefully they trounce them. And then they play the 49ers, and then you see if they can actually have a second chance to show the NFL that they could play with the big dogs. But right now, great weapons, but they only beat easy opponents. So we got to see the Seattle Seahawks beat a opponent with a winning record. And at number 7, I have the Buccaneers, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They look great against Philadelphia, blowing out my team, just lighting them up, good game planning. Baker Mayfield is looking really great. 8 touchdowns, almost 1,000 yards passing. Chris Godwin, 3 touchdowns, over 300 yards receiving. And they finally got Mike Evans involved more, and Mike Evans is just an awesome wide receiver. So they got plenty of weapons. They're using Irving more because Rachaad White, not the best running back, but he's a good catching running back. So they have a lot of weapons, and they're doing great. And they're not just beating bad teams like the Seattle Seahawks. They beat the Lions and Commanders, both with a winning record. And they beat the Eagles, who have a 2-2 record. Now, they do have an embarrassing loss to the Broncos, but a lot of guys on the Tampa Bay side were hurt, especially Vita Vea. He is their heart and soul of their defense. But beating the Lions 20-16 in Detroit is a very good win. And now that them blowing out the Commanders looks even better now that the Commanders are 3-1 and they look like they could possibly win the NFC East. So Tampa Bay Buccaneers proving a lot of people wrong. I do not like that they cannot really get to the quarterback. Before the Eagles game, they only have 4 sacks so far. So that is terrible, but they did have 5 or 6 sacks against Philadelphia, so that kind of juices their numbers. But they need more consistency of getting to the quarterback, or they're not going to go far in this league. But I do like them. They're beating some good quality teams, and their offense looks legit. Baker looks like he is trying to prove a lot of people wrong. And at number 6, I have the Houston Texans. Now, the Houston Texans, it was difficult. I was debating between pitting the Buccaneers in front of them, but I decided not to, because if I had to choose a quarterback, I would choose C.J. Stroud over Baker Mayfield at this time. But Baker could prove me wrong, and there are a lot of other people wrong. And I like the Texans have a high-power offense as well. Depends who you like more. Do you like Nico Collins more than Mike Evans and Stephon Diggs? That's up for you to decide. But I've got them at number 6 right now. They have a high-powered offense like all the other teams. They have Mixon at running back, who should be coming back pretty soon, if not this coming week. They have, like I said, Nico Collins, the leading receiver in the NFL. Stephon Diggs. Diggs is playing like a Swiss Army knife. Guys rushing for touchdowns, catching touchdowns. And they have the speedster and Tank Dell. And they have Schultz at tight end. So they have some really great weapons. They just need to put it all together. They have Will Anderson, Stingley, Hunter on defense. One thing that concerns me, like with the Seattle Seahawks, the same problem. The only teams they've beaten are bad teams. They've beaten the Colts, the Bears, and the Vikings. with all those teams, the Colts being 2-2, but they're not really great. The Bears being 2-2, I believe as well. Bears are going to finish in 4th place on NFC North, and the Jaguars can possibly be the worst team in the league because they have no wins. So not good. And the only team they played that's worth that could possibly win the NFC North, the Minnesota Vikings, they lost. They got just blown out. They didn't have a chance against the Minnesota Vikings. They lost to the Minnesota Vikings 34-7. So you might be wondering, why am I pitting them in front of the Buccaneers? The quarterbacks, this is not who has the best record, but I do trust CJ Stroud more than I trust Baker Mayfield. I like also when Mixon's healthy, I like the running back better than both the two-headed running back of the Buccaneers. So at this point, I can see the Buccaneers jumping them, don't get me wrong, but the Texans do play the Bills, and if they do beat the Bills, I can see the Texans maybe creeping up the top 5 or staying there. So they have something to prove to the other teams that they belong with the big dogs. So I think them playing the Bills is a good matchup to show the NFL that they are actually one of the great teams. But for right now, they're at number 6, but they could easily fall the top 10 or be in the top 5. We'll see. And talking about the Buffalo Bills, the number 5 team in my power rankings is the Buffalo Bills. Now the Bills, they got embarrassed. The Baltimore Ravens ran on them like nobody's business. I mean, King Henry, it was like vintage King Henry, lowering his shoulder and just knocking guys out. They had over 250 yards, maybe. I think it was 270 yards rushed on them by the Ravens. King Henry had over 200 purpose yards against them, so that was not good to see. That might be a recipe of how to defeat the Bills. But the Bills are getting healthy. I believe they're getting a linebacker back, so that's really great for them. But the other problem I have with the Bills is they're with the same problem I have the Seahawks and Texans. The teams they defeated are not good teams. They defeated the Cardinals, who are 1-3. They defeated the Dolphins, who are 1-3, and they defeated the crappy, lonely Jaguars, who haven't won a game in the NFL yet. And the team they do play that has a good team, a good roster, is the Ravens, and they get blown out 35-10. So they have to prove something here. They play the Texans and then the Jets, but the Texans, I think, they need to show that the Bills are not a fluke. They had last year they were losing a lot of games, and they came back in the end to win a bunch of games to make the playoffs. So I think they need to prove that they are one of the top teams against, they got to prove to the rest of the NFL that they're one of the top teams. They got Jared Allen, they got Coleman, they got Kincaid, they got Knox, they got Cook. These are not world beaters, but it's a solid team around Jared Allen, spreading the ball around. I believe he has 7 or 8 touchdowns passing, or 2 or 3 touchdowns rushing, and not that many turnovers. So he's having a great year, probably in the top 5 MVP candidates right now. But they got a little healthier on defense, so they need to put it together. And I'm only having him number 5 because I believe he's better than CJ Stroud. And I have him ahead of the Buccaneers and Texans because I'll take Jared Allen over CJ Stroud and Baker Mayfield. But if they lose to the Texans, I can see the Bills falling out of the top 10 because the only opponent they played that was worth something blew them out. And the only teams they've beaten are terrible teams. So they got to prove that the Ravens game was just a hiccup and they're actually a great team and they can beat the great teams. Because if they don't, they're out of the top 10 and possibly frauds. And at number 4, the team that demolished the Bills, the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Ravens are only 2-2. I understand that, but the way they demolished the Bills was unbelievable. The King Henry and Lamar Jackson just came in there saying that we don't care what you have or what you do. We're just going to run the ball down your throat. And they did that. Henry had over 200 yards, purpose yards, and Lamar Jackson, he had a good efficient passing, and he had a good amount of rushing yards as well. Now, they have an embarrassing loss to the Raiders. The Raiders are terrible. I don't know how they lost that game. They probably took them too lightly. Not trying to give them excuses, but I don't know how you lose to the Raiders. They have one of the worst rushing offenses and they're one of the worst rush defenses. And they lose to the Chiefs by 7 points. What are you going to do? It was in KC, but that seems like a long time ago. But then they beat the Cowboys and they beat the Bills. Now, I know they barely beat the Cowboys as well, but their rushing attack, if they could just keep this up and keep their somewhat okay secondary off the field, it's great. But I think the way they are pounding the ball is going to be a big problem for other teams. With that kind of rushing attack, you could beat anybody. It doesn't matter. I'm not willing to give up on them just yet, even though they're not great. They've lost some close games and the record's not so great. Even though they had a tough loss against Kansas City and a tough loss against the Raiders, I believe this rushing attack is something special, and I believe they could beat any team in the league if that running game just gets going. I do believe they will blow out the Bengals this week, but it'd be a good matchup to see them against the Commanders, which I think they'll beat the Commanders as well. But this rushing attack is just elite. Lamar Jackson's doing pretty good this year. Henry's doing awesome, leads the league in rushing. So I have him at number 4 because that rushing attack almost seems impossible to stop. All right, guys, and at number 3, I have the Detroit Lions. Lions looked really great against the Seattle Seahawks. They have a good test against the Minnesota Vikings 2 weeks from now, so I can't wait to see that game. But, the way their offense, once it gets rolling, it is hard to stop. With all the weapons, Laporta, Williams, St. Brown, Gibbs, Montgomery, that offensive line, once it gets going, it is hard to stop. Now, Seattle, they haven't really played anybody, so maybe they're a bit of fool's gold, Seattle. So maybe that win is not as big as it may look like down the future. But they did beat the Cardinals and the Rams when they're fully healthy. So, the Rams was a solid win. You like them to beat the Cardinals a little bit more, but the Cardinals are a surprising team as well a little bit in this league. So, good quality wins. They did lose the Buccaneers, but the Buccaneers are a legit team who I believe are going to probably win the NFC South. But I'm liking what I'm seeing from the Lions. They have a lot of grit, fight in them, and when that offense is rolling, you better watch out. And they put a number on the Seahawks, putting up 42 points. And they play Dallas this coming weekend, and I believe they'll beat the Dallas Cowboys as well. And my number 2 team is the Kansas City Chiefs. Now the Chiefs, I can't get my thumb on them. Every team they've won, the Ravens, the Bengals, the Falcons, and the Chargers, all came down to kind of like the last minute. Now, the Chargers put up 10 points on them. It was 10-0, and the Chargers had a lead for quite a bit of the game. The Chargers had nobody. They're all injured. And the rest of the teams, they've barely won, either by a last-minute touchdown, a penalty call that helped them. So I don't know what to think about the Kansas City Chiefs. They don't have their best corner. I know they're still a really good team. They have the best coach and they have the best quarterback. But they also lost one of their best weapons in Rice. Now, good for them. They get Hunt, the running back. He's probably going to be their number 1 guy, or they'll mix a bunch of guys, but good pickup regardless. Their receivers, they're probably going to spread it around a little bit more with Juju and their rookie Worthy. But I'm still not really convinced that they're the powerhouse they were like last year. Kelsey looks a bit slower, so that's not great. Mahomes, I believe, has 6 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. It's not looking like classic Mahomes. So I have the number 2 at 4-0, but it's not a confident number 2 in my rankings. I could definitely see them losing. They play the Saints, which they should beat the Saints. And then they play the 49ers, which that'd be a great game 2 weeks from now. So I think that'd be a big test for them. But, Mahomes is still great, and they have Andy Reid, the best coach in the NFL. So I have them at a number 2, but a shaky number 2. So we'll see. And my number one team, which I'm very surprised they're number one, I have the Minnesota Vikings. Now, Vikings, they just come out of nowhere. Everybody thought that Sam Darnold was just a stepping stone to the McCarthy, the guy they drafted from Michigan, and that was it. But this guy is having a great bounce back year, having 11 touchdowns, only 3 picks, and I believe around 930 yards passing. So, wow, just, maybe he finally needed a head coach that believed in him. Besides that, Justin Jefferson having a great year, like 350 yards receiving. They have a great bounce back year from Aaron Jones, who had an injured year last year with the Packers. And talk about the Packers. They dropped 31 points on the Packers in Lambeau. Now, that's hard to do because the Packers at home is really hard to defeat. But they've dropped 31. The game looks close, but it wasn't that close. Packers got a garbage touchdown. They beat the Texans, blow them out, actually, 34-7, beat the 49ers 23-7, and they beat the crappy Giants 28-6. But you want to blow out those crappy teams. So the Minnesota Vikings hitting people on notice, showing they're here, and they have a great shot winning the NFC North. NFC North is going to be a fun division to watch. The Packers and Detroit, I think, are going to be there towards the end. Hell, all three might make the playoffs. They got the Jets this coming weekend, which I think they'll defeat. And then they have a great game against the Lions, which I can't wait to see. The Lions looking really good as well. So this would be a great matchup for them, and another time to show everybody that they're not some fluke. A lot of people think that Sam Darnold is going to come back to earth or possibly get hurt, but I'm not seeing it. I thought he would come down to earth against the Packers, and he lit the Packers up. And they have really good defensive players as well. They got a lot of free agent acquisitions. People thought after losing Hunter that how are they going to get to the quarterback? Well, they're showing you they still get to the quarterback. So the Minnesota Vikings, a surprising team to be at number one in my power rankings. Well, guys, that is my top 10 list, my power rankings for this week so far in the NFL. And just a quick recap, I have number 10, the Commanders, number 9, the 49ers, number 8, the Seattle Seahawks, number 7, the Buccaneers, number 6, the Texans, number 5, the Bills, number 4, the Ravens, 3, Lions, number 2, Kansas City, and number 1, the surprising Minnesota Vikings. So, it's been a wild and crazy NFL season so far. I'm enjoying it. Thank you for tuning in, watching this small little channel. Please like, subscribe. It helps me out. It's free, so it's not going to charge you anything. You're just here watching me. But I enjoy doing this, and it just brings me happiness. And I'm hoping you guys enjoy it as well. Please tune in for my Fool's Gold list that I'm releasing out this week. It's about who teams that you think are great but are fooling you, and they're probably not going to be anywhere or go to the playoffs. So last week I put some teams on that Fool's Gold list, and they had a terrible week this week. So please tune in for the Fool's Gold list that I'll be creating this week. And I want to thank you guys for just watching in general. And I can't wait to break down and pick my picks for week 5, which I hope you tune in for as well. So as always, guys, thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.